Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Learning with My Rabbis. I'm very, very excited for tonight's guest, Dr. Ron Wolfson. Though not ordained as a rabbi, he is a rabbi's rabbi. He speaks around the world, not just teaching at the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies to all the future conservative rabbis being ordained there like myself, but teaches rabbis around the world how to build community and relationship. Ron is the Fingerhut Professor of Education at the American Jewish University, president of the Kripke Institute. He is a much sought-after consultant and lecturer on building relational cultures for Jewish day schools, synagogues, and community centers, along with camps around the world. He's had a profound effect on the Jewish community through his book, Relational Judaism, Using the Power of Relationships to Transform the Jewish Community. In addition to training clergy and educators, Ron is the author of many books, many books, to be honest, bringing values and rituals of Jewish life to popular audiences. God's to-do list, the 7 questions that you are asked in heaven, the spirituality of welcoming, the art of Jewish living series. I have here the copy on Shabbat, which I give to all of my conversion students. I recommend they read, but there are also copies for editions for Hanukkah and Passover, I believe, as well as a book about morning rituals. Ron and his wife, Susie, live in Los Angeles, and they have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. And Ron has a couple of newer books that are out. One is The Best Boy in America. It's a memoir. It's stories of his life, as well as Raising A-plus Human Beings, which we will get into all of these in just a bit. Ron, it is a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Louis. You know, I have to call you Louis because everyone in the audience needs to know that you're the best student I ever had at the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies.
You're going to make me blush on camera, but Louis is more than fine.
Okay, Louis.
Before we get into some of the context and the material that you go out and you teach us as students and you teach to synagogues and boards, I would love to start off with just a little bit of your story. How did you get to be this consultant on Jewish education, Jewish community building? How did you become Dr. Ron Wolfson?
It's all an accident. I mean, if you know, the truth is, anybody who knew me growing up in Omaha, Nebraska, can't believe that I became a professor of Jewish education because I was such a wilde chaya. Do you know any Yiddish? Wilde chaya means wild animal. I was a wild animal in Hebrew school. I went Monday and Wednesday 4 to 6 and Sunday morning 9 to 12. And I learned exactly one Hebrew word. This was the Hebrew word, sheket. Sheket. That's all I heard from my teacher. Sheket, sheket, sheket. You know, you know what it means, right? I mean, it means.
I've had it yelled at me a few times. I actually was cursed by my Hebrew school principal to someday be a Jewish educator for what I put her through. And lo and behold, it became a blessing. But
yeah. I'll ask a group, you know, what do you think sheket means? And people will say, quiet and sheket bavakasha, quiet, please. And I said, I never heard bavakasha, never. It was just sheket, sheket, sheket. It was so bad. This is a true story, Louis. I went for my first bar mitzvah lesson, and the tutor was a man from the old country. He pinched my cheek and he said to me, "So, Sonny, what's your name in Hebrew?" I said, Sheket. I thought my Hebrew name was Sheket ben Avraham for the longest time. So how did I become a Jewish educator? Oh, well, I was on my way to rabbinical school, truth be told. I was studying at Washington University in St. Louis. I'd studied at the Jewish Theological Seminary for a couple of summers. I was on the list to go to rabbinical school longer than I think anybody in the history of the seminary. And I got recruited into teaching by a rabbi in St. Louis by the name of Bernard Lipnick, may he rest in peace, who had this crazy idea. He said, kids love summer camp, Jewish summer camp, but they don't love afternoon Hebrew school. And that resonated with me. And he had been one of the founding counselors at Camp Vermont in Wisconsin. And he said, why aren't we doing camp during the year? So he kind of invented a really groundbreaking model for doing Jewish education for post-bar and bat mitzvah kids. We called it the creative name, the Vav class. And the idea was to take kids away for weekends once a month with kind of a youth counselor. And he hired me to be the youth counselor. And Susie, my new wife, had came along as a non-paid volunteer counselor to the girls. And it was an extraordinary experience. Bernie wrote a book about it called An Experiment That Works in Teenage Religious Education. And the kids wanted to continue in a next year. And I got recruited to enter a doctoral program in in education at Washington University in St. Louis. And Susie and I ended up taking these same kids to Israel for a phenomenal 9.5-week intensive living experience in Israel that became the subject of my dissertation. And at that point, Rabbi Lipnick said to me, Ron, there are lots of really terrific rabbis, but there are not that many people who go into Jewish education who have the kind of creative juices that you have. So maybe think about that. But if you do decide to become a Jewish educator, you need some more study in Judaica. So that's how I ended up at the then called University of Judaism, now American Jewish University. I came out to do the first 2 years of the pre-rabbinic program we used to have here before the Ziegler School was established. And I got a master's degree in Jewish studies, and then the university offered me a job that I couldn't refuse. I had told Susie we'd be in Los Angeles for 2 years, and it's been 46.
Wow. So it's amazing how things just sometimes fall into place. These weren't your plans, but... we plan and God laughs. That's an old Yiddish expression. So I'm wondering, you've written books on so many different topics, and your newest book is really a guide on raising kids, right? Raising A+ human beings. And who is it directed? Is it to the parents or to the teachers? Who do you intend this for?
It's a great story of how the book came about. A colleague of mine at the university, Dr. Bruce Powell, is the outstanding Jewish day school educator in North America. He himself led 3 outstanding Jewish day high schools here in Los Angeles and has consulted on creation of maybe 27 or 28 Jewish high schools all over North America. And Bruce, I would invite, you might remember, to my class in the Ziegler School on creating sacred communities to give a lecture about creating culture. And Bruce would tell the story that he would tell his incoming freshmen in his day high school, not all of you will be A+ students in chemistry, but all of you can be A+ human beings. And that's the goal of Jewish education. Well, the minute I heard that years ago, I said to him, Bruce, you have to write a book about this. And he said, I'm too busy running a school to write about a school. And then a couple of years ago, he stepped down as the head of school of De Toledo High School, which is a high school of 400 kids here in Los Angeles. And I said, well, you have no excuse now, Bruce. It's time to write the book. And he said, I don't know how to write a book. And I said, well, I do. I'll mentor you. And then he turned tables on me and said, would you like to write the book together? So I consider this book the Torah of Bruce, and I'm the Rashi. I'm the commentator. But we've had a great time writing the book. The book is designed primarily for school leaders, both professional and lay boards, But we did include the last chapter about parents and grandparents as partners with the school in creating a culture both at home and in the school that encourages the raising of A+ human beings, kids who have kindness and excellence in their lives. And we find that when a school creates an atmosphere of embrace, culture of embrace, a culture of kindness, a culture of no gossip, a culture rooted in Jewish values, a culture of circles of friends rather than cliques, we find the academic excellence goes up. So it's not one or the other. The subtitle of the book is crafting a Jewish school culture of academic excellence and AP kindness. There's not actually a course in AP kindness in Bruce's schools, but it permeates the entire culture that he and his colleagues at these schools created.
Well, I think it's a great value to be teaching and emphasizing. The world can always do with more kindness. It's something that we see lacking today.
We are actually hearing from a lot of parents and grandparents who have been with us on webinars that they wish the politicians in our societies had this book to learn, how to treat each other with dignity and embrace. So the book is resonating even beyond the school climate.
Well, I think that the value of disagreement but respectful is a deep Jewish value and something that the world needs more of. Jewish values would work well in the world. I'm curious, you mentioned in there, right, you have this one of the chapters for the parents and grandparents about creating this culture at home. One of the things that I always had difficulty with, I was never a day school educator, but I spent a lot of years teaching in synagogue religious schools as an undergrad, as a rabbinical student, and all throughout in different parts of my life, was I would be teaching the kids things that they never did at home, that their parents dropped them off at the synagogue to learn, and then at home they didn't do Shabbat, they didn't light candles, they didn't do Havdalah. I actually met once a first or second grader who thought that Havdalah was done on Sunday mornings. So that was the only time they ever saw it, was when their Hebrew school teacher did it on Sunday mornings in the classroom. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
They probably thought Shabbat was on Friday morning from preschool,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's a problem. Some of us Jewish educators call this dry cleaning Jewish education. Drop off the kids. You educators, you rabbis, you make the kids Jewish, not too Jewish, but Jewish enough. And it's part of it is that a lot of parents and even grandparents are kind of intimidated by our traditions and we have a very deep and somewhat complicated a set of traditions, of practices, of liturgy. And for a lot of people who did not get Jewish educations or have come into Judaism as an adult, it can be intimidating. So, people don't like to be in situations where they are not confident about what they know. I mean, I would not teach my grandchildren math because I don't know the current, techniques of teaching math. So I understand there's a hesitancy, but there are simple things that parents and grandparents can do that model Jewish behaviors in the home. Like I often say to parents of kids, hey, wouldn't it be nice once a week for you and your family to have a candlelit dinner around a nice table and some good food, some nice wine, and share time with each other without screens and tell each other the stories of your lives? Doesn't that kind of sound nice? Well, that's a good definition of Shabbat. And you can do a ritual in 10 minutes. And you can sit together as a family and it will change your life. I don't think we should be afraid in our synagogues, in our schools, in our Jewish community centers to say, you know what, you affiliate with us, you come into our community and your life will be significantly different. It will be enhanced because here you can find a path to meaning. Remember that old song, What's It All About, Alfie? You can find a way to discover the purpose of your life, how you can use your God-given talents and gifts and passions to make the world a better place. You can find a sense of belonging. You'll have a group of friends who will be there for you in good times and difficult times like we're living through now with the pandemic. And this will be a place where you can celebrate the many blessings in your life. I mean, people ask me, why be Jewish? That's one reason. This is a reason to be Jewish. This is a reason to invest in yourself in the life of a spiritual community like your great synagogue, and find meaning and purpose and belonging and blessing.
I really resonate with that answer because I grew up in a family that actually we had Shabbat meals fairly often with candles and a couple of blessings, but we went to synagogue too when we were younger. But then, out to Red Lobster if it was my week to pick the restaurant for lunch afterwards. The Kiddush was very crowded. My family didn't like to, fight over a bagel and tuna salad, which was both a nice family meal. But when I started going into more observant spaces, it was a big learning curve. Even though I went to Hebrew school and even Hebrew high school for a couple of years, I learned a lot about Jewish culture, but not a lot about ritual. And I get how intimidating it is when you come to synagogue. I talk a lot with my conversion students about it because they feel very intimidated walking into a synagogue. And I try to remind them that so many Jews who didn't grow up doing this regularly also feel intimidated. They don't know when to stand, when to sit, when to bow, what to wear necessarily. I mean, it's one of the things I love about the Art of Jewish Living series is it explains so well the different rituals and a way for people to really break it down and understand them and feel confident leading them for their, partners and their own children. What do you think synagogues can do better to make people feel comfortable coming in with a low level of knowledge? Because I saw a recent poll here, a recent study done by the Federation here in Toronto, which really kind of concerned me in that it found that of young Jewish adults, 25% of them, said that they wanted to be more connected, but 30% of them said that they don't go to synagogue, not because of money or other issues, but they don't feel Jewish enough.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the Pew Research Center just a few weeks ago, about a month ago now, put out an update of their study of American Jews. And again, the big takeaway, Louis, is a very high percentage of their respondents report they're proud to be Jewish. They're interested in being connected to Judaism. They're just hesitant about affiliating. And that's part of a trend in, I think, North America, generally speaking. The newer generations are kind of suspicious of institutional frameworks. There's a lot of DIY going on, a lot of do-it-yourself. And there's a tremendous amount of creativity online now. Oh my goodness, My Jewish Learning and Kveller, and I could go on and on with the resources that are available now for people to access.
We had last week as our guest, Marian Haberman, who grew up actually at Valley Beth Shalom in summer camp with me in Malibu in JCA Shalom. And she runs the YouTube website, My Jewish Mommy. And she has over 40,000 subscribers and gets tens of thousands of views of how to light candles, how to do Shabbat. Never spent a day in rabbinical school. And she reaches out and connects to more Jews than almost any rabbi I can think of in terms of bringing Judaism into their lives. So the internet's been just what you're saying, incredible as a resource.
And listen, now with the pandemic and the fact that every synagogue in the world, almost except the Orthodox communities, went online with everything, with their worship experiences, with their Torah study, with their social justice work. And I can now, and you can now, and anybody can now dip into almost any synagogue in the world. So your question is a very apt question right now, which is, what's the value offer of a synagogue, and what can synagogues do better that you can't do online? And the answer really is a community of sacred relationships, because I can get all the programming I want for free online. I can get all the worship experiences I want free online. So why would I invest, in a synagogue today? And the answer has to be, this is a place of sacred relationships. And so the synagogue not only needs to present the knowledge in an accessible way, to understand that when people first experience Shabbat, for example, the place to start is, what's the benefit to your family, not all the details. Like for in my book that I wrote back in 1985, I include stories of people who have come into learning about Shabbat, because I wanted the readers to understand that they're not alone, that a lot of people feel this intimidation. But you can dip your toe in the water. You can start slow. You can add a couple of easy blessings, and blessings that really are meaningful to you. So, for example, when I grew up, and I'll bet the same is true for you, maybe not. When I grew up in a conservative synagogue in Omaha, my parents had no idea that there was a ritual on Friday night of blessing the children, that my parents could be the rabbis in our home and give us the priestly benediction. And that was something hidden away in Orthodox Siddurim and Orthodox prayer books. But my goodness, when you teach a family with young children that you as a parent, you as a grandparent, have the power to give a blessing to your children and your grandchildren, really? Every week I can do that? And that's the place to start, in giving people the meaning of the ritual, not just the details of what to do and how to do.
I think it's so important, the meaning, and like you said, relationships and connection. You and I actually spoke a couple of months ago. I reached out to you because our synagogue wanted to conduct a poll, a survey of former members to get an idea of why they left. And after chatting with you, we ended up going a different route. I made a lot of phone calls over a month and a half, and of the 80 or so people I reached out to, I got 30 something of them responded to me. And I was fascinated by the results actually of it, because one of the things we found is, of the people that left, when I asked the question, talking to them about connection to other members, overwhelmingly, they didn't know other families, or they knew very few other families, right? It seems that there's a problem with connection and relationships, especially among the younger families that were new to the synagogue, because there's a lot of families that, between cousins and parents and grandchildren, everything, they make up 40 families, which is wonderful when you have that kind of connection. But new families, it can be an intimidating environment. So how do you suggest, or what do you recommend to synagogues that are looking to build that kind of relationship and intentional community? 50 years ago, we were a bungalow. In that growth, that sense of community maybe didn't get passed down to those who joined in later.
Yeah, so there are really two challenges, Louis. One is that in a place like yours, with multi-generational families, they have a sense of community. Both your families have a connection to the congregation, and if you grew up in the shul, you have a sense of connection to the rabbis, to the cantors, to the teachers, and all that is great. But you're right, if you're a new family, just moved to Toronto, and your own nuclear family, your extended family from, is back in California, you're on your own. And here's the problem with synagogues. The regulars, the people who are already comfortable in the congregation, when they are together, and God willing we'll be together again soon in person, tend to spend most of their time with the people they already know. You go talk to your friends at the Kiddush. You sit by your friends in the shul. And so you tend to spend all of your time in the congregation with the people you already know, rather than learning the model of Abraham and Sarah in the Parashat Vayera, where Abraham is sitting at the entrance of his tent and 3 strangers come by, and Abraham gets up and runs to greet the strangers. And our community, sometimes even our leadership in our congregations don't learn that message of hachnasat orchim, of welcoming in the stranger, as one of the most important Jewish values. Instead, we kind of default and talk to the people we already know. So one answer to your question is synagogue leaders have to be much more attuned to spending a few minutes when you are together, or even when you're on Zoom, to connect with someone you don't know. When I'm in person in a congregation and I give a talk as a scholar in residence, I will actually do what I call a relational moment in the talk. And I'll invite the people in the sanctuary to go meet someone they don't know for 5 minutes and share their story with each other. And it's extraordinary what happens. So that's the first challenge, is to help our people understand, spend a few minutes and try to connect with people you don't know. And then the second thing synagogues can do, and this is the main focus of another book that we could talk about, the Relational Judaism Handbook, which is the follow-up to Relational Judaism, which I wrote with Rabbis Lydia Medwin and Nicole Auerbach, 2 outstanding Reform rabbis who are the small group engagement rabbis in their very large Reform congregations. And what they are doing, and what I recommend to your congregation, is to think about both the natural small groups that exist in the congregation and the small groups you can develop in the congregation around 4 themes, if you will, 4 strategies. One is affinity. What do people in the congregation enjoy doing? So if you do these phone calls next time and you say to the people you're calling, not just who do you know in the congregation, but tell me your story. What are you good at? What are your hobbies? What are your talents? What keeps you up at night? What gets you up in the morning? You'll hear the person's story, and then your job as the leader of the congregation is to connect them to other people who share the same, hold on a second, sorry, who share the same affinity, the same interests. That's one way to organize groups. So we now know congregations have all kinds of small groups, including groups that have developed on Zoom. One of the popular ones is baking, or sharing recipes together. And you say, well, that's what synagogues ought to be doing. Well, yeah, because it's connecting people to each other who share an interest. And then there are Torah study groups and men's groups and women's groups, the typical kinds of things that we do. A second way is demography. What stage of life are you in? So are you an empty nester? Or do you have young children? Are you expecting a first child, Louis? And you've got a natural demography group. You have a group that I'm going to tell you, when this baby arrives, B'Shah Tovah, you're going to be looking for other new parents or even slightly older parents who can help you navigate what life is now going to be like. And let me tell you, it will be very, very different. and wonderful. So that's demography. What stage of life are you in? And then there's geography. Toronto is a very big city. You've got members all over the city. So we saw during the pandemic, especially last year for the high holidays, some synagogues were deploying shofar blowers to neighborhoods because you couldn't come into the building, but you needed to hear the shofar. So people would send out shofar blowers to neighborhoods. So geography is a way to organize groups. And the fourth way is availability. When are people available? Now, during the pandemic, a lot of people have been available online. But as we go back to work and school and so on, the question is, you have to be careful about when people are really available to gather in small groups. So that's, I think, the cutting edge of synagogue life right now.
I love it. And I love the way you divide into those four categories. And geography is such an interesting one, because that was another thing I heard from many people that had left the sense they love the synagogue, but they just don't get to come to it often enough because Toronto is a spread out place and we are off the Jewish derech, off the main Jewish street here in Toronto. But besides that, the recent study the Federation did also showed that not so many Jews or younger Jews are live there either. They're moving all over the place because affordability is such a problem here with the housing market. But we had, I remember at Minyan pre-COVID, a person that was coming to say Kaddish for a parent every single day. And about 6 months into the year, they found that they actually lived on the same street, a few houses down from another person that came to our daily Minyan, because that day they happened to leave at the same time and they just followed each other, one car after the other, all the way to the shul. But they'd been both living there for over a decade and coming to the synagogue for the better part of a year every single day. And they had no idea they were neighbors. And yet the synagogue, we have that data. And to make that kind of shidduch and build those relationships for people that otherwise, right, it'd be a lot more convenient to do something in their neighborhood, invite each other for a Shabbat meal than to schlep all the way to the shul.
Exactly right.
Kind of connection.
Exactly right. And when we are back together and it's safe to have neighborhood-based meals or Havdalah celebrations or sukkah party, look, if we've learned one thing during the pandemic, it is this: a synagogue is not a building. It's a community of relationships. And the places that have refocused their energy on creating these connections, and it sounds like you have work to do there, it's paid great dividends for the congregation. Their membership is not going down. While a lot of synagogues have seen drop-offs of members, because if I'm a transactional member, I'm only there to get high holiday seats or a rabbi on call or bar mitzvah for my kid, and I don't need you anymore. I'm not real connected. I don't know the rabbis. I don't know the teachers. I don't know anybody else in the congregation. A whole series of programs are not going to solve that problem. The challenge really is to invest time and energy, and some synagogues are hiring now engagement rabbis like my colleagues Lydia and Nicole. And it's not that they don't do other rabbinic duties, but their main focus is on creating small groups. In Lydia's congregation, the temple in Atlanta, there are 65 small groups meeting regularly. Wow. So it takes energy, it takes a focus, takes intentionality, but it's possible to do. And the goal is to make sure that everybody is well connected, really on 3 levels, 3 tiers, I call them. The first tier is to connect people to the Jewish experience. That we do a good job at when we get people engaged. The second is to engage people in a way that with our clergy and our teachers and our executive director and our people in the office, so people don't feel anonymous. They feel seen and heard, and that the rabbi knows my name. And that takes some effort on the part of the clergy and the staff and the teachers. And the third, even more importantly, is to connect people to each other, peer to peer, so you have that group of people beyond your family who will be there for you and share life together and explore this thing we call Judaism together. And that, when all three of those things are happening, you have a vibrant relational congregation.
So this is for me. I love that term, transactional, right? Judaism, or transactional Jews, right? I think that's how you phrased it. Because so much talk I've been seeing, not just at our synagogue, but all the synagogues in Toronto, I think, especially the conservative ones, are talking about mergers and affiliations and the future and planning, because they're all kind of seeing the same problem. Because I think we're about a decade behind the States, where this problem's been a little bigger for maybe a little bit longer and is already on the radar more. And one of the big things that comes up is trying to find a way to make it cheaper for young families. But already a membership is a few $100s for a new family. And there aren't a lot of new families that are taking that up. And of the families I spoke to, even ones that cited financial reasons, and this is why I loved your idea of a conversation, because when we got below that, what that meant, it wasn't that it was too much to pay. It was too much to pay for what they were using the synagogue for. That their membership fee wasn't too much if they felt that they were getting more benefit out of it, if they had more opportunities to use it. So my question is, on the opposite, though, to those who would say that Judaism is about, right, prayer, it's about the Torah service, it's about the ritual, right? A synagogue shouldn't be in the business of getting people together to bake or for a bike riding club or a social justice mission. And this isn't my view. I think you and I are very much in line, but I'm curious how you would respond, right, if I'm playing devil's advocate, right? That's what a community center does, not a synagogue. Why should we be in the business of that? That's what gave us, Jews whose only Judaism is tikkun olam, who go out and, condemn Israel. And that's the extent of their Judaism, right? Is that because all they know is tikkun olam. How would you respond?
Look, what we find is that these small groups that are organized by the congregation get credit for that. And then people are in relationship with each other, and they respond better to the invitations to come together for a Shabbat dinner at the shul, or to be involved in the, what should we call it, the activities of the congregation, or to even volunteer for the congregation, if you're approached to volunteer in the right way. The old model of volunteering is, let's give you a list of committees to please, please, please volunteer for. And nobody does because they're too busy. And the people on the inside who know about this know that if you volunteer for a synagogue committee, you'll be made the chairperson automatically. And it will be a life sentence. You'll never get off the committee. So instead, if the offer to volunteer to these people who are in the small groups that do baking and biking and play softball together, if the opportunity is to say to them, you know what, the Purim Carnival's coming up next month. We need you for 3 weeks to help us organize the booths. No meetings. We're going to do it all online. And we just need a little help. Or, gee, I see that, when we had our conversation, you really are concerned about the homelessness issue in Toronto. Well, we've got a small group of people from the congregation that are working on that issue. Would you like to come to a gathering to talk about that? Small commitments lead to larger commitments. Success leads to more success. So it can't be one size fits all. It can't be just a list of committees to volunteer for, please. It's got to be more personal. We make Jews one at a time. And we have to listen to their stories and connect them to things that we have to find people where they're at and bring them along. And it's not one size fits all. They will eventually get to prayer. They will eventually get to study if they're approached in the right way.
I've been hearing a lot, the trend word in synagogues seems to be in Jewish institutions, design-based thinking. Design-based thinking I've been hearing a lot. And maybe it's come to the States earlier than it got to us here in Toronto, but it just seems to me so obvious. I'm confused why it is an idea. When I first came here, we were not. I watched a couple of young family or a couple of intergenerational Shabbat programs that were designed for everybody and to bring kids in on a Friday night. And there weren't a lot of kids coming. So I talked to a few parents and they told me, it's spending $25-$30 a plate. Adds up when a family of 4 or 5, spending all this money where they're chasing their kids and they can't enjoy their meal. They're taking it home in a to-go bag or eating something cold at home because they didn't get a chance to eat. And they're also spending all of this and their kids eating a couple of chicken fingers or something. And it just, right, I had this immediately what the problem was. So we started a new program. We called it Ruach Shabbat, where it was just a noodle bar, different types of noodles.
There you go.
Sauces, kids could build it themselves. It was $5 a person. We had youth leaders after the meal to then do activities with the kids so parents could have coffee and talk to each other. The salad even was deconstructed. So a kid who doesn't like carrots doesn't say, I'm not eating anything because that salad has carrots in it.
Yep.
They could pick out for like a salad bar and make their own, right? It just, to me, it seemed so simple. And our first few of them were instantly, we had over 100 people at these, which was great.
That's great.
But why is it so difficult for synagogues to make these kinds of changes?
Because
I had a lot of pushback about giving up the old model of doing that Friday night family Shabbat program. No. You have to look. I'll tell you why it's so difficult. Because over the ark in your sanctuary, there is a phrase in Hebrew. I don't know for sure if this is true, but I've been to the one you're thinking of.
Okay, probably. I've been to hundreds of synagogues, and I've seen this 90% of the time. This saying above the ark, the Aron HaKodesh, is Da lifnei mi ata omed, know before whom you stand, meaning God. And I often joke with a group of synagogue leaders, no, it shouldn't say that. Above the ark, it should say, but we've always done it that way. Synagogues are traditional institutions. They're not easy to change, especially when you talk to old timers who like it the way it is and are used to the way it is. But you have to explain to them that all the energy and effort and money they put in the congregation all these years will go down the tubes if you don't understand the upcoming generation and what's going to engage them. And what's going to engage them is noodle Shabbat. That's what's going to engage them, not gefilte fish, which they don't like, not a rubber chicken dinner, not running around after their kids. That same model I talked about years ago. I learned it first in Atlanta, where a conservative synagogue did chicken soup Shabbat. And it was the same idea. You walked into the social hall and there was a buffet of different soups. There was a chicken soup, based soup. There was a vegan soup. There was, and then there were noodles. There were flat noodles. There were little noodles. And you made your own bowl of soup and you got to a table and there was a salad and a challah and some grape juice. And it was $5 a person. And there were 800 people in the place when Susie and I were visiting. And here's smart thinking. You got where did you collect your soup? In a tureen, like a big cup with 2 handles with the logo of the synagogue on it. It said chicken soup Shabbat. And you take it home as a party favor. Wait a minute, Ron. We're not doing parties in synagogues. Why not? Why not do swag? In this book, Raising A+ Human Beings, Bruce talks about the importance of swag in schools. The T-shirts with the name of the school that you wear proudly. Why not do that? How many of your members have a membership card in their wallets? We don't do membership cards. I've got a AAA card that says I've been a member for 50 years. I'm very proud of that. I just got it. 50 years I've been a member of Southern California AAA. Wow, I've invested a lot in AAA. I've used it a lot. And that's something we have to think about in answering the question. We have to be much more savvy about strategies to engage people and meet their needs. A colleague of mine, Vicki Kelman, when we were doing early work in Jewish family education, used to say to families she was working with who would say, I can't do this Shabbat thing because, china and silverware and the dining room table, me and my husband, we both work and our kids are fried by Friday afternoon, and we're not going to sit down on a formal dinner. And Vicki would turn to these families and say, I have 2 words for you. Serve pizza. Because yes, the food has resonance with a lot of us who grew up with chicken soup and chopped liver and brisket, but it doesn't for a lot of people who didn't grow up with that. And what they need is ideas to focus, to remove the obstacles and raise the bar of engagement. So you remove the obstacle of having a fancy dinner, but you raise the opportunity to do what's really important, which is to bless your children and light the candles and sing a song and check in with each other. That's what's really important. So not what you're serving. And it was a very powerful message. And I think that's one of the things we have to do in our congregational life going forward.
Well, it's one of the things I've been pushing, and it's not that I'm a genius that I thought up this program, but like you said, you saw this other thing in Atlanta. I saw it from somewhere else. I call it the looking over someone else's desk strategy.
Absolutely.
I think you have a different name, but you talked a lot about that in our class and brought in speakers from all sorts of organizations, even non-Jewish ones. And in your book, you looked everywhere for a good idea. How can we make this more accessible? What can we learn? So what should we be looking at as a synagogue? How should we be learning? How should we be deciding what is worth bringing in versus what is too far, right? Even, I know in your book or in class, we talked about Disneyland as a model for welcoming people in. So how did we decide what's too far? We're not going to build the Matterhorn at the synagogue. That's something we leave for Disneyland. But their way of greeting people, that is something that we should have. How do you find that balance and know what to take?
Look, I have a principle of learning, which is if there are 1,000 people waiting to get into a congregation, I want to know what's going on. When I was first introduced to Rick Warren at Saddleback Church in Orange County, California, and there were 5,000 people coming every Sunday, 3 times every Sunday, I said, what are they doing that's working? And what are the principles underneath their practice that I can apply to my setting? And there are dozens of principles. The same thing with Disney, the same thing with Nordstrom, the same thing with Barnes and Noble. I mean, there are principles that you can learn. Nordstrom is a good example in this new book, Raising A+ Human Beings. Bruce tells a story that he once called Nordstrom and said, I've shopped in your store. I don't know, do you have Nordstrom there in Toronto?
I'm not sure, actually. I haven't.
Okay, well, it's a high-end department
in a while, but yeah.
It's a high-end department store, well known for their customer service. So he goes to Nordstrom and he says, tell me, you must be training your people because they're so quality service oriented. They're so kind. They're so eager to help solve your problem, to find you the right things. How does that work? How do you train them? And you know what I hear from the Nordstrom people? We don't train anybody. We find people who are like that. We find people who are kind. We find people who are engaging and relational. And I think that's what we try to do in synagogue life as well. So there are all kinds of little tips that we can learn by exploring together. So when I visit a congregation, I will often say, Tell me about the places and the experiences you've had that you consider to be great quality service experiences. And people have all kinds of suggestions. And then tell me about bad service experiences. Oh, nobody returned my phone call. Oh, I called the place and all I got was a AI, what do you call it? A recording. I never talked to a human being. I mean, people know what is good relational work. They know what works. So I'm an ethnographer. I always look for those things that I can bring to synagogue life. And the other thing I would suggest to you that works, as we're doing with this new book, is a community read. In other words, when your leadership sits down together and reads the Relational Judaism Handbook about how to do a relational engagement campaign, you're all on the same page, literally. If you get copies of this book for the families in your schools, and they read it together with your teachers and your educators and your clergy and your staff, you will know the questions to ask about how we can build a stronger culture of embrace, of welcoming and kindness in our community. Because we've all read the book together and we have thought together about the questions at the end of each chapter. That's what we're seeing happening now around North America. With this book what came out in the middle of March and is already in a third printing, 5,000 copies. It's a huge runaway bestseller, Louis, because people are gravitating to this idea of a community read that puts literally everybody on the same page. That is a suggestion I make to synagogues that really are serious about doing relational work. And so whether it's one of my books or somebody else's book, it's a very powerful idea.
I'm just curious your take on this. Is one of the things I've noticed, besides learning what we can do from other places, is a little bit of what we maybe shouldn't be doing. I like to use the example of Chick-fil-A, even though I've never eaten there. Even when I didn't keep kosher as a child, it was not a fast food restaurant on my zeitgeist. But In-N-Out was the big one everyone talked about then. But Chick-fil-A has got a following, and yet many, many people boycotted them when their views about LGBTQ issues came out. And I actually was doing some research. I found the Kinsey Institute said that over 75% of Generation Z stops buying brands they already shop at because they find that they don't represent their values. That 1 in 3 person or millennial, someone my age and younger, even a decade older than me and younger, in the last year has boycotted a brand they previously shopped at because something came out of how they treated some minority or whatever it was, an issue of women or for people of transgender, whatever the issue was. So my question is, when we talk about trying to get people to join our synagogues and give money to us, when so many younger people won't even spend money on a thing they already like, they're already sold on that they want, and for me, the message is very clear, actually, but I don't want to lead you to it. But can we be learning something? Is there something when it comes to how we engage on social issues that maybe is a baseline for where we need to start if we want to get younger Jews to be joining our organizations? Do we need to be more proactive about our messaging and our...
Yes, we must be more proactive, and we must not be afraid to ask of people more than dues, more than money. A good example is IKAR, which you know well from your time here in Los Angeles, an independent minyan started by Rabbi Sharon Brous and her partner Melissa Balaban 18 years ago or so, with 7 people in Sharon's living room, and are now 930 membership units. Now, how do you go from 7 to 930 in 18 years? Well, you get there because you're not afraid to ask people to do more than give money. You stand for something. You stand for the best of Jewish tradition. And when people come, as they will, with no expectation of membership, come in anytime you want. But if you're interested in becoming our member, we expect 4 things from you. The first is we're a small staff in our congregation. We need your help. We need you to volunteer. We need you to bring your talents to help build this sacred community. That's the first ask. The second ask is we're a learning community. We expect everybody to be learning, whether that's coming on Shabbat to hear a Devar Torah, or to go to a Torah study session, or to a book club. We expect everybody to make a commitment to learn in our community because we're a learning community. The third ask of a new member was a social justice commitment. Find some way to use your talents to make the world a better place. We are made B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Don't look for God in the heavens. You're God's angel on earth. You have talents and gifts you can bring to doing the work of repair and the ongoing work of creation. Be God's partner in the world. And the fourth ask is financial commitment at whatever level you're comfortable. That's kind of in your face. That's not just, oh, you want to join our synagogue? Well, here's the dues structure and enroll your kids, and here's some committees to please volunteer for. It's a completely different ask. And it has resonated with people who otherwise would never walk into a synagogue. There are artists, there are politicians, there are people who love the davening, which is a traditional conservative davening. You've been there.
Yeah.
There's no cutting corners in that davening. They didn't cut corners to bring more people in. They lowered the obstacles and raised the bar of engagement, and it's worked. And you can do that too.
It's amazing. Like you said, when other synagogues have been shrinking, there's something that was started in a living room and has grown now into, I believe they just recently moved into a new building or
they're building the building. It got delayed because of the pandemic. I'll tell you something else they did. They've become a national, maybe international congregation, because anybody can watch their services online. They've gained 200 members. They call them Ikar from afar members. Ikar from afar members. And they created a membership category for people from all over the world who want to connect with Ikar. And you could do that from Toronto too.
Love it. So my final question, I want to be respectful of your time, is
Sure.
Just a piece of Torah that you can share with us. Any teaching on anything that's been significant and meaningful to you?
Well, I gave you 2 already, and I would just underline that. Be like Abraham and Sarah. You know, Abraham is sitting in that entrance of his tent at the heat of the day. But what happened? The sentence before in last week's parsha, the parsha before Vayera. What did Abraham do? He circumcised himself at the age of 99. Okay, now wait a minute. He's 99 years old. He's sitting at the entrance of his tent. It's hot. And Rashi asks the question, Rashi, the commentator, medieval commentator, asks, what was Abraham doing in the heat of the day in the entrance of the tent? And his answer is, he was studying Torah. This is the rabbinic imagination. Another commentator says, no, Abraham was praying to God. That's what he was doing in the entrance of his tent. And what happens? 3 strangers walk by. Does he know who they are? No, he has no clue. He has no idea who they are. Only later do we learn they're angels from God to tell him and Sarah that they're going to have their first baby. Louis, their first baby. So what does Abraham do? The text says he runs, yaratz. He ran to greet the strangers and offers them what? A little morsel of food and something to drink. But then what does he do? He goes and runs to the tent, further in the tent, to Sarah and the servant boy and says, get the best USDA grade A choice beef. I don't know what it is in Canada.
Canada.
Okay.
I don't know.
Give him the best cuts give him a rib steak. And give him some milk. I know it's not kosher. This is biblical, not rabbinic. But what did he do? He underpromised and overdelivered. And he brought these strangers who he received as the B'Tselem Elohim, the images of God that he must have felt in his heart was the right thing to do. He ran to greet them. He hurried to greet them. And that's the bottom line of relational Judaism is we need to run to greet the stranger. We need to run to welcome people in. We need to lower the barriers of engagement and raise the bar of meaning and purpose and belonging and blessing. I know your congregation does a great job. It's a great community. I wish everybody good health, be safe, and let me be the first to say to you, because Rosh Hashanah is September 6th, Shana Tova U'Metuka. Thank you, Louis, for inviting me.
It's really a pleasure, Ron. I remember, it's great actually that your class is one of the last classes we have in rabbinical school, so it's fresh in our minds when we go out, because I think it's one of the most important. But I remember it was during the application process and all of that in interviews, and I was talking to you and I said, maybe I go and it's just a couple of years and I get to come back to California or someplace else. And I just celebrated 4 years now at Beth Tikva. And it really is a wonderful community. I look forward to many, many more. It's Canada's embraced me, Toronto's embraced me, and most of all, this community that you and my other teachers at Ziegler prepared me for. I just want to thank you so much for being on here. Like many of the teachers that we've had, even if you are not ordained a rabbi, you are a rabbi in every sense of the word. You've been one of my teachers who's impacted me, and it is a pleasure and an honor to get to carry some of that Torah forward and to share with my community. So thank you so much, Ron, and thank you to everybody who's joining us tonight. It's really a pleasure to get to share my teachers with you, and we hope to see you back for another episode of Learning with My Rabbis. Have a wonderful rest of your night.
If you don't love your neighbor, if you gossip about him, if you never have mercy, if he gets into trouble and you don't try